Are you the friend who's always being asked for health advice? Now imagine turning that passion into a fulfilling career with our Become a Nutrition Coach program. Step into a world where your enthusiasm for wellness becomes the heart of your own thriving business. With me as your professor and guide and coach on our user-friendly digital platform, you can learn from anywhere at your very own pace. It's perfect for your busy life. Envision empowering others to live their healthiest lives, all while growing a career you love. You're not just gaining a certification here, you're joining a community of like-minded professionals ready to support and celebrate with you every step of the way. So what are you waiting for? It's time to nourish your future and help change lives, including your own. Head over to nutritiouslife.com/BNC for a free class and a sneak peek of the program. Your journey to becoming a nutrition coach begins now. Are you ready to hear about something that you may have never heard about before, that I'm betting you're going to be hearing a lot about in the near future? I'm Keri Glassman, your host of the Living a Nutritious Life podcast, and wow, do I have a good one for you today. I just had the most fascinating chat with Dr. Stephanie Venn-Watson. This was not my first chat with Stephanie. I've been so lucky to work with her and her company, C15, over recent months. I've been so blown away by the research she's doing and the discoveries she has made that I wanted to bring her on here today to share it all with you. Dr. Stephanie Venn-Watson is the CEO of Seraphina Therapeutics. She's a seasoned veterinarian epidemiologist and public health scientist. Stephanie previously served at the World Health Organization and the U.S. Navy. And Stephanie is the researcher responsible for discovering C15, the first fatty acid discovered in over 90 years. You probably have heard of fatty acids. You may know the term as it relates to omega-3s. Well, today you're going to learn all about C15. C15 is linked to better heart health, improved insulin sensitivity, improved liver health, and even better sleep and energy. I don't want to give it all away. I want you to hear it all from Stephanie. So let's dive into this. As always, please remember to rate, review, and share. Welcome to Living a Nutritious Life. I'm Keri Glassman, a celebrity registered dietitian nutritionist. Join me every Tuesday on YouTube and your favorite podcast platforms as I bring in some heavy hitters to share the latest in nutrition and wellness science. We dive deep into food, sleep, stress, relationships, and so much more. Your weekly guide to a happier, healthier, more nutritious life. Hello, Stephanie. I am so excited to see you. Even if I'm just seeing you over the screen here, I'm always excited to sit down with you, and I always learn so much from you. So I am so excited for you to be able to share your incredible wisdom with all of our listeners today.
Oh, Keri, it's great to be here. Wonderful to see you.
I'm so excited for this conversation. So, okay, I'm going to dive right in here because I think you have one of the most interesting, incredible backgrounds, and I want everyone to hear the full story. I mean, I know there's lots and lots of details, but you give as much of the story as you think is important of how you got from being a veterinarian to doing what you're doing today as it relates to C15, because when you first told me this whole story, I remember I was just like, my jaw was just like on the floor. I was like, what? Wow. I just kept saying like, this is incredible. So can you give us that little background or big background?
Now that you said that bar, Keri, I'll do my best.
I think, well, listen, the science geek in me found it really fascinating.
Oh, this is great. So, I'm a veterinary epidemiologist. So I should mention I was a veterinarian. I became a veterinarian, Keri, because I was really, like, even as a kid, nerd out all the time on pattern recognition. So I would love looking at patterns even from as a little kid. I'm not good at a lot of other things like coordinating physical activities or riding a bike, but I've always been really good at things like nerdy stuff, like recognizing patterns. So
Wait, like patterns. That's so interesting though. As a kid, like what was an example as a kid? Like what did you do as a kid that was recognizing patterns? I'm so curious.
So my dad, he was a budget administrator at a college library. So he was head of finance and budget. And they would have like old books with numbers in it. And he would just give them to me, and I would take them down into the basement, like as 6 or 7 year old, and I would just circle patterns and and then not that the patterns even made, who knows if the pattern made any sense, but it was just a thing. He just knew, give Steph a book full of numbers, and that will keep her quiet for a good 30, 40 minutes.
Wow. Wow. Give her a book of numbers and it will keep her quiet. Okay. I don't know how many parents can say that about their child, but go you and your dad.
So there's that. I guess we need to go back that far. But the whole point being,
I like it.
Went to undergraduate at UCSD, planning to go to medical school. And then I read this book by Laurie Garrett called The Coming Plague. And Keri was like, oh my gosh, there is a job in the medical world where your whole job is looking for patterns. And she was basically covering a lot of epidemiology that was being done to track down Ebola. Wow. And so I was like, I want to do that. And so I was going to go to medical school and then to become a medical epidemiologist. Mm-hmm. And then I had the good fortune of meeting a veterinary epidemiologist. And he said, gosh, Steph, if you really want to understand disease, not just people, if you really want to understand disease and how disease works and patterns of disease, then you should learn it in a bunch of different species, including humans. And then you'll really understand. So I went to veterinary school, and then after that got my master's in public health at Emory, and worked for CDC, the World Health Organization, and was like on track to, I was doing all the things that I was hoping I'd want to do. And then out of the blue, got an offer from the Navy to help join them as in San Diego, to be a veterinary epidemiologist to better understand aging-associated diseases in older dolphins. And I was like, oh, heck yeah.
Amazing. My first thought is, wow, dolphins. Like, who knew that dolphins were studied that much? Like, you don't think, because when you think also, especially a lot of like scientific research, you see mice and you see like, I don't know. To me, that was unusual.
Yeah. So what happened, the Navy's cared for this large population of about 100 bottlenose dolphins for over 60 years. And they live in San Diego Bay, go out into the open ocean every day, and Keri, every day they choose to come back. So they get really good care. And what was amazing was to speak to the foresight and the dedication of the Navy, they brought me in as a veterinary epidemiologist purely to continually improve the health and welfare of their older dolphins. So they take such good care of their dolphins that in the wild, they live to be about 20 years old. At the Navy, they live to their 30s, 40s, 50s, and now I'm learning even into their 60s. Wow. So they said, gosh, we've got older dolphins. We want to better understand their health because they don't actually, not a lot exist in the wild. So they brought me in, and we noticed that some dolphins were aging healthier than others. Some dolphins were getting high cholesterol, chronic inflammation, things that sound pretty familiar, full suite of changes in the brain consistent with Alzheimer's, all the things of aging. And interestingly, some weren't. So we were able to apply this advanced technology. This is as deep as I'll get probably here, but called metabolomics. And that's where we studied thousands of small molecules present in their blood and in their all fish diet. And we expected, to be honest, that it was going to be omega-3s that predicted the healthiest aging dolphins. And Keri, lo and behold, as you know, there at the top was this molecule and fat I've never heard of, which was C15, pentadecanoic acid. That was 10 years ago.
Okay, so you literally are using this technology, like you said, metabolomics. Is that what it's called?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay, so you're using that, and you're looking at the dolphin's food, and you're looking at the dolphin's blood, right? Is that correct?
That's right.
And you're saying, okay, what is it about the dolphins that are living longer that's different? And you're expecting, okay, I'm going to see at the top here in their blood omega-3 essential fatty acids. That was sort of what, okay, is that correct? Did I just summarize that correctly?
That was perfect. Oh my gosh,
Okay.
well, they eat fish. They're the ones that are super healthy are going to have really high omega-3s.
Okay. And then all of a sudden, ahead of that was this fatty acid that you had never heard of and never seen before.
Yeah. And so there you go. So C15 popped up, pentadecanoic acid, and predicted the healthiest aging dolphins. And from there, we then moved pure C15 into the lab. And over the next 3 years, we did 8 core studies to find that not only is C15 an active and beneficial saturated fatty acid, but that it was meeting these rare criteria of being an essential fatty acid. So we published that work back in 2020.
Okay, and so just for everyone out there that don't know what essential means is, so essential means that we cannot make it on our own. We have to get it from an outside source. So that's a really important point here, and that's why some people know that about omega-3s. Omega-3s are those essential fatty acids because we do not make those on our own. We have to get them somewhere else. Okay, so you discover C15. What can you explain now? And you can get a little sciencey here. I think our listeners want to hear a little bit of this. Yeah, let's nerd out a little bit, and then we can simplify it if we need to. But what exactly is C15? I mean, I know the C stands for carbon. Not everybody might know that, but what is it exactly?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a fatty acid. So if we talk about, and that, like you had mentioned, omega-3s are fatty acids. C15 is a fatty acid. So it's in this family of fats that are fatty acids. Within fatty acids, most people know like unsaturated fatty acids and polyunsaturated fatty acids versus saturated fatty acids. So those are kind of two divisions that we know well. Omega-3s are polyunsaturated fats. C15 saturated fats, and within the saturated fats, there's actually 2 groups. And this is where most people, this is new news for a lot of people, that not all saturated fats are created equal, that in fact, there are 2 groups of saturated fats called even chain and odd chain based upon the number of carbons in the chain. If it has an even number of carbons, it's an even chain saturated fat like C16, C18. If it has an odd number of carbons, like C15, then it's an odd chain saturated fatty acid.
Yeah, and it's so interesting because I hadn't heard of C15 until before I met you, but not until your product actually that you've developed. So I first heard of C15 with fatty 15, which we'll get into in a moment, but I hadn't heard of it before then. But for, I don't know, for X amount of the past years, I have been saying that same thing. There are certain saturated fatty acids that are beneficial to you. And what I usually say to people is not only is all saturated fat not bad for you. Did I just do a double negative?
Yeah, that's
there?
Right. That works. Yeah.
Not only is all saturated fat not bad for you, but some saturated fat, a little bit of the right type of saturated fat within a healthy whole food diet can actually be very beneficial for you. Certain types of saturated fats found in whole fat dairy, cheese, and now C15, which is also found in those, but I didn't even know of this one then. But I've been knowing about that. So then when I heard of this new one, I thought, wow, this is even more incredible. A new saturated fatty acid that I'd never heard of. And I got really excited, and I've been reading about it. And then I finally met you. And anyway, all right, I'm going off on a little bit of a tangent. Let's go back to that saturated fat conversation. So saturated fat, I love how you just explained that not all saturated fat is necessarily bad for you. A little bit of the right type is actually really beneficial. So let's talk about that, because I do think that many people some people still fear fat, by the way. I always say fat is your friend. We need fat for so many reasons. I mean, we could go on and on and on about why we need fat to stay full and satisfied, to absorb our fat soluble vitamins. I mean, we need fat for, we know, many, many reasons. But I think some people still have just finally adopted that. I think some people, when they hear saturated fat, they still really steer away from it. They're scared of it. So let's explain a little bit further. Why is this saturated fat healthy for you?
Okay, well, let's go do that. So this was really a surprise, because when you talk about saturated fats, it really is about the difference in the carbon number. So when we talk about these even chain saturated fats, studies continually show higher levels of them associated with a higher risk of type 2 diabetes, fatty liver disease, heart disease. And then when you look at the odd chain saturated fats, C15 and C17, it's the opposite. So it's like the large scale prospective cohort studies, human studies showing that people with higher C15, C17 have a lower risk of type 2 diabetes, heart disease, fatty liver disease, just like we were finding in the dolphins. So it's like, okay, so what's going on here? So once we moved moved into the lab with the pure fats, we actually tested all of them, Keri. We said, let's look at 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, and 8.
Wow.
And let's just actually see what's happening here. Why did 15 rise to the top for the dolphins? So the series of studies that we did showed us a lot of things. And the repeated finding that we've had was that C15 was the Goldilocks saturated fat, that in all the things that we tested it for, C15 was the best, and the only one that was the best, and it was all positive benefits and no negative. So when we talk about what specifically, we know C15 does a lot of good things. So nature has found a way for this simple molecule to do a lot of heavy lifting to ensure our long-term health. So again, if it's essential, just like you said, so our bodies have to have certain levels of it. Our bodies don't make enough of it, so we have to get it enough from our diet. If we don't have enough of it, then we can become deficient in C15, and that means that we'll experience a poor disease state. So we need C15. So what does C15 do? One of the primary jobs is it is a stable saturated fatty acid. So it's a stable fatty acid that goes into our cell membrane. So we're made of cells. That's all we're made of is cells. Every cell has a cell membrane that protects it and allows it to function so that we can function and stay young and not age as fast. And C15 goes into the cell membrane, Keri, and its job is just like an armor for our cells. It's super sturdy. It's not susceptible to attack by oxygen and lipid peroxidation and all these reactive oxygen particles, that we talk about that plays a role in disease and aging. So it has a very simple role of just structurally helping to make our cells stronger so that we can, continue to support our health.
I love that. That's exactly how I describe it, which I guess I learned from you. But I think I always describe it to people like that. Just imagine all the cells in your body getting this nice armor wrapped around it just to protect it from anything bad happening to it. I mean, that's a really simplified version there, but that's how I think, but I think that's just a kind of a simple, easy way to think about it, right? It's really protecting us. And I think it's really interesting what you just said about the oxygen species, because I talk a lot about that with antioxidants. I mean, what are antioxidants, right? They fight the free radicals that cause the damage to our cells, right? And that cause inflammation and all kinds of disease. So how you just described that they're resistant to these free radicals is really wild.
Yeah, it's so important that this simple aspect of protecting our cells against these free radicals and oxidation is a mechanism that evolution has long used to ensure longevity. So there's this theory called the pacemaker theory of aging, cell membrane pacemaker theory of aging by A.J. Holbert. And what he showed, he was looking at species, and he was trying to understand how does a human, that's a mammal, live 37 times longer than a mouse, which is also a mammal. And what he found, it's really cool. He has this graph, and he shows that the more stable the fatty acids in that cell membrane, the more resistant those fats to oxidation, the longer a species lives. So he was just able to show just by having stronger, that armor around our cells enables a human to live longer than a mouse. So it's like, can we leverage that so that as individuals, we can then push it within ourselves so that we can protect our health and live longer too?
Yeah, it's really incredible. Now I'm thinking about it. just like that power of eating a whole food, high antioxidant, nutrient dense diet in conjunction with getting your adequate C15. I mean, that is just like, bam, so powerful, right?
You got it.
Amazing. Okay. So now we know what it does. We know that saturated fat is not bad for us. It's actually really good for us because it's that odd chain. Let's talk a little bit about some of the things we see. We know it reduces inflammation. It plays a role in heart health. So let's dive into some of the actual things you found in the different studies. I know you've done lots of clinical research, so let's talk about some of that.
Right. So then when do we start caring? So it's
Right,
like, great,
exactly.
healthy cells. What am I going to feel?
Great. My cells have little armor around it. That's great. But yeah,
Like,
what does this really do for me?
mentally, I guess that feels good. But so the reason why, our advisors, our clinical advisors, and, our partners are so excited are because it produces tangible results within months, right? So if it's really something that our bodies need, we should feel some kind of difference and improvement, especially if we were starting to get the state of what's called cellular fragility syndrome, or this nutritional C15 deficiency that we just published in Metabolites a few months ago. So it's the first nutritional deficiency syndrome to be identified in over 75 years.
Oh, I was going to ask you about that.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. I just got very excited about that though. So let's
So
we're going to get to that. Don't you worry.
So we'll get there. So understanding that some people may be in an actual deficiency disease state, or in a it's a spectrum, right? So when we get C15 back into our bodies, the improvements that we see are really focused on metabolic, liver, and heart health. So lower LDL cholesterol, lower liver enzymes, like you said, decreased inflammation, improved insulin sensitivity, strengthened red blood cells. So this is something that was very consistent. So if it strengthens our cells, some of the cells that we're most likely to see from a doctor visit, because they're not necessarily pulling liver cells and heart cells out at every, doctor visit, but you do get your red blood cells taken. And so as we get older, our red blood cells, all of our cells become weaker.
As I've mentioned to you, one of the biggest things that I've noticed from taking Fatty 15 is improved energy. And is that because of the red blood cells?
It very well could. So there are a couple things that could be helping you with increased energy. The first is that among all these wonderful, basic cell-based things that C15 does, it also repairs mitochondrial function. Right. So a lot of people, one of the reasons is if mitochondria are the powerhouses of our cells, makes energy, that can translate up for a lot of people into this increased energy. But it could also be, exactly from if we have weak red blood cells, exactly what you're getting to. A lot of people, especially as we get older, our red blood cells, all of our cells naturally become weaker, including our red blood cells. We lose red blood cells. And what you're getting to, Keri, is that with that comes fatigue, because its whole job of red blood cells is get oxygen to our tissues. And we don't have that then. So one of the things that we've seen consistently are stronger red blood cells. So they're healthier longer, and that enables us to be able to support all of that. So really like a broad sweep of benefits. So we tell people when they go to their doctor, go get before starting Fatty 15, if you're going to choose a supplement, to go get your blood taken ahead of time, and then go at 3 and 6 months and really take a close look at your cholesterol, your inflammatory markers, glucose, insulin, liver enzymes, and then your red blood cell indices as well.
Yeah. Back to the energy for one moment, because I do really want to make this a point. I mean, I'm an energetic person. I have pretty good energy. No, I have pretty good energy, but I crash a couple of times because I'm a real early riser, and I get up early, and the minute I'm up, I just go. And I also have a little bit of that perimenopausal waking up at 3 a.m. lately. So my sleep's not great. It's never been great. It's especially not great now. So I've been getting that 3-4 o'clock in the afternoon, exhausted. I kind of end up getting a second wind, but it's a little rough there. And then I can also just have that 9 o'clock at night, sort of falling asleep on the couch. And now, since I started taking C15, I do not have that afternoon fatigue, and I still go to bed early because I like to go to bed early and get up early and feel good. But instead of kind of falling asleep on the couch and then going to get ready for bed, I am just going until I go to bed. And my energy is great until I get into bed or until I do like wind down, and then I go to bed. I've noticed a huge difference. And I was really surprised by that. I don't know, because again, I'm always fascinated by certain things that we can do to not just live longer, but live longer better and optimize our health, right? That's a big term. We know everybody's saying optimize your health, but I've always been a big believer of that. Like really, like live your absolute best, feel your best. You can feel really good. You shouldn't be dragging through the day. You shouldn't feel that you can feel really good. And so so very often, we think we had this conversation before too, I'm a big fan of supplements. I'll take different supplements that I know are preventative. I don't know if I'm not necessarily feeling a difference. I'm taking them to be proactive for my health in the future, whether it's for my brain health in the future or my heart health in the future. Not necessarily feeling anything, but I'm taking them based on the research. I know they're not bothering me. I'm hoping they're helping me for the future. Some of them but C15, I've really noticed the difference. Fatty 15, I've noticed a real difference. And that I was really surprised by, because I was convinced by the research. I'm like, this research is so great. This is so fascinating. I'm going to look at my blood work like you just suggested, which I haven't been taking it long. I haven't gone back again to look at my blood work. I guess I've been taking it long enough to go back and look at the blood work. I haven't, but, and I'm super interested to do so, but I was planning on just doing that. And doing it, in a preventative manner. I wasn't necessarily expecting to feel so much better. And I have to say, and I'm not just saying this to you because you're here, that I've said this, and that's why I'm so excited to, to have these conversations and learn more about it. It's just, I'm just such a fan.
Oh, well, thank you, Keri.
Let me talking to about it. I'm like speechless. No, I really have been. I've been a huge fan.
It really is. And it's amazing. And when you talk about optimizing health for somebody like yourself, so you're super healthy, right? You're conscious, you eat the right foods. So it's to be able to have something that can even help you feel better it's a big deal. So it just means that it's, I think a big part of it is when we developed the supplement, it was truly using the word supplement, right? So how can let's eat the right foods and let's eat well. And we developed Fatty 15, this pure C15 supplement in collaboration with the U.S. Navy. So the Office of Naval Research funded most of the research that I was just talking about with C15, specifically to say, how can we supplement the diets to then optimize our C15 levels in a way that, you can personalize it. You can decide how much you take, when you take it, when you need it, when you may not need it, but it allows you just one more tool in that toolbox. And we have, with our customers, we have right now over 75,000 active customers, and half of them reliably report feeling better within 2 weeks. So that was for us a delight and surprise, because that is not why we developed Fatty 15, was like, feel better in 2 weeks, and it's this, improved energy. For some people, it get better sleep and less joint pain. But really it's for this long-term health benefit. This delight and surprise of now, is a big reason why our retention rates are we have over 95% monthly retention rate, which is unheard of in the supplement industry. It's just, and I think it's a big part, Keri, of exactly like what you said. It's like, I feel better.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And I'm not surprised by that at all. So you just brought up food. I want to talk about that because again, I just mentioned I'm a big fan of supplements. Obviously I take Fatty 15 and I take many others. I take other supplements too, but and I'm sure all of our listeners know, I'm always, food first, get your nutrition in where you can from food, use supplements to do just that, to supplement your diet. I think it should kind of go without saying, but sometimes I like to remind people of that. So I think C15, though, is an interesting one in terms of getting it from food because of where it's found. So I'll let you share about that. And I already hinted to it at the beginning of this podcast, but let's talk about where you can find C15 in food and also whether or not you think some people can get enough from food.
Right. So, okay, our primary source of C15 is dairy fat, as you had mentioned, Keri. So, and by far, while there are other foods that may have some C15 in it, for humans, for especially in the Western countries, it is dairy fat and whole dairy fat. So that means whole fat milk, cheeses, sour cream, cream cheese, butter are really our primary sources of C15. Even within those a milk fat, if you just take just milk fat, it is good to note that only 1% of that milk fat has C15 in it. And it has, milk fat has over 400 different fatty acids in it. It's made to be the perfect food for every mammal at birth, right? So every mammal gets milk at birth. So nature has made milk to have everything that baby needs for a certain period of time. Our bodies have been built to only need just a little bit of C15, but without that little bit, that's where things start going south. So as our diets, as we started moving away from whole dairy fats, like you said, this whole fat scare, when we took away, the pro-inflammatory saturated fats, we also took away the good saturated fats. And that's resulted now in meaningful decreases in these deficiencies. So that does mean that we can get C15 back into our life in a meaningful way through the diet. We can go Sardinian if you want right now. Of like there is proof that you can even get optimal C15 levels through the food, through specific types of cheeses and lifestyles.
Right. Pecorino cheese, isn't that the highest in C15?
Yeah.
So good, pecorino. Oh, so good. Okay. So, yeah. And I think that's why when it comes to C15, I think it is one of those things where it's a nutrient where, yes, you can get some of it through your diet, add in, as I was mentioning before, a little bit of whole grass-fed, whole fat grass-fed dairy. There's many different health benefits within an overall healthy diet. The problem here is that you're likely still not getting enough to live optimally. You might not be as deficient, but you're not necessarily reaping those optimal benefits because it's really just hard to get enough of that C15 in without it then working against you.
Yeah, that's
the amount that you have to get in, right? Is that, I think that's right. Okay.
That is a great way to put it. It's that if you, if you're taking, in fact, there's studies showing that, when like a mouse, for example, is fed a high fat diet, a lot of fat, because you're talking about, eat a little bit of whole fat and that's good. So if somebody or a mouse is given a high fat diet, their C15 levels actually go down. And the hypothesis for it is that because if you have too much fat in the diet, and C15 is only present at 1% of all of these fats available, it just can't compete with these other fats, and it may be actually less likely to get absorbed. So like you said, there's a limit on really, unless you're in Sardinia and you're not eating meats and you're eating these grass-fed, high-altitude goat, sheep cheeses every day, it's really hard to get these optimal levels. Most people are sitting on around about 0.2% of C15 in their blood, which is right at the edge of deficient. Sardinians are at 0.4, 0.6. I don't shy away from whole fat milk and dairy. I have a 0.46%, and I know, Keri, I couldn't get there on just food alone. I really would. I might be able to get to the 0.3, but to really get to that kind of Sardinian zone of 0.4 to 0.6, you're supporting longevity. I personally need that supplementation.
So let's talk about the levels a little bit. So what is the level that we should be going for so that we're not deficient? What is the level for optimal health and longevity? How can we find out our levels and all that good stuff?
Right. So as a great way to put the categories. So the first is let's not be deficient. So we have shown, and this is really a culmination of ours and other studies over a 10-year period, showing that if our cells have less than or equal to 0.2% of all fatty acids in that cell membrane, if it's less than or equal to 0.2%, so just a little, our cells become too fragile. So we lose that armor, and our cells become fragile. It's called cellular fragility syndrome. And it results in actually a whole new form of cell death that was discovered by a team of researchers at Columbia University. We won't nerd out too much there, but it's called ferroptosis. And it showed up in 2012. Nobody understood what was happening. We understood that this new form of cell death was accelerating aging, increasing the risk and making worse, type 2 diabetes, heart disease, fatty liver disease. And we now know, 12 years later, that ferroptosis, this new form of cell death and accelerated aging, is actually caused by having too little C15 in our cell membranes. So we want to not have that. So part of this is like explaining why are we seeing younger people getting these aging associated diseases. In some ways, it's really sad, Keri, that children are getting diseases of their grandparents before their parents.
Right.
So let's not do that. So if you need to have your optimal level is going to be like not optimal, to not be deficient, like 0.25 to 0.3. Let's get you off that. Don't be standing right on that cliff, which most people are right around 0.2. Right. Let's get you off of that edge and then be able to not be deficient. So that kind of gets us back to where we were before we took dairy fat out of our diets. And then now, because of this, because of fatty 15, and there's a highly bioavailable pure C15 supplement, we now can get to these optimal levels of 0.4 to 0.6, which is where, again, Sardinians in the blue longevity zone, they have levels higher than anywhere else, 0.4 to 0.6. They have most men and women, and interestingly, with men living beyond 100 in the entire world, they are less likely, they live longer because they're less likely to die of heart disease. And there's a whole separate study. There's just this large prospective cohort study that was done by a group of Harvard and a lot of other institutions. And they did this huge study with thousands of people. And they showed that people that had C15 levels between 0.4 and 0.6, that they had a lower risk of developing heart disease. So we have a lot of support that optimizing, but it's hard to get into that space. And that's why we're thrilled that the supplement can be part of that solution for optimization.
So I have a question, because obviously, you discovered this. You're a researcher, an epidemiologist. This is what you've been doing for your life. You're super passionate about it. You found these incredible benefits from C15. You discovered the cellular fragility syndrome, the first deficiency, right, in 75 years to be discovered.
Yeah,
is that it? 90 years, 75 years?
Yeah,
right?
75 years. Yeah.
So you're obviously very passionate about it. I have a question for someone listening. They might be thinking, okay, so how do I know if I should take this? Like, who do you think it's right for? And who do you think it should absolutely take it? I mean, I guess that's hard to say without knowing them as an individual, but what group of people do you think, hey, you really should be taking this? What group of people do you think it's not going to hurt you? It's going to help you most likely. Who do you tell us about that?
Yeah, it's a good question. So as essential nutrient, we're now realizing we all need C15. So, one of the critical groups are really the generations that have grown up in a pretty C15 deficient world. So people who are actively avoiding dairy fats and milk fat. So it's, because the plant-based milks don't have any C15 in it. We know that if mom is C15 deficient, her baby her milk has less C15, and infant formula has no C15 in it. So there's a whole nother group working on with maternal health and children's health, showing the importance of C15. So that work is still ongoing.
Do you think this will ever be added to formula?
I think so. In fact, there's the groups that are doing these studies, Keri, are at the end of their conclusion in the paper are repeatedly that C15 needs to be included into infant formulas. Wow. So work needs to be done, right? Yeah. In order to do that. But understanding. There's a group in France who they have been following from late pregnancy until now the children are 6 years old. And they've shown that the higher C15 levels mom has, the more baby got, the better their body growth, their brain growth, and now cognitive development, including overall cognition.
Oh,
And
wow.
right,
Wow.
all the way up to the age 6. So so I think the younger set, again, these are the people now, they're now in their 30s is really when dairy fat really from birth, they really got less than, I did, that they're probably at the high, again, these are ones that are seeing diseases set in earlier than they should. So let's take care of that group first. So active avoidance of dairy fat.
Mm-hmm.
And then our oldest customers are actually the most emphatic and excited ones, because it's like it fixes you where you're broken is where a lot of people tend to like. And so
it can make all my cells stronger. Like
yeah.
I just think I'm going to be stronger and younger, and wow.
And they feel it. So then our older folks that are taking it, we're broken in a lot of ways, and you feel so many benefits out of the gate that they're the most excited, because it's like you're saying, I can feel it working. So those are the two groups. And then in the middle, again, it's kind of more of that, taking a C15 test could be helpful. So the Genova Diagnostics, we worked with them to develop an at-home C15 test.
Mm-hmm.
And physicians also, if your doctor has access to a fatty acid panel, it probably he or she needs to make sure it has C15 in it. But you can get your C15 tested in most routine fatty acid panels. But if you don't have access to that, Genova was kind enough to develop this at-home C15 test. So you can see where you're at and kind of use those levels to guide.
Yeah, absolutely.
Whether I get to 0.4 to 0.6, or, oh my goodness, I am deficient, and let me just not be deficient first. And then you can pair supplementation with food to kind of get you to the right place.
Wow. This was so good. So much good information. Thank you so much. I have one last question for you, because this was really, I think every listener probably right now, their mind is just going, this is so good. So much information. Well, I always think, this is one of the things that I love about nutrition is that it's a new science. It's a young science, and it's always changing, and there's so much to learn. And I always think, and I say to clients sometimes, I can't invent new foods for you, but I can help you figure out ways that you might like them and easier ways to get those in your diet. But sometimes when there is a new supplement and a new nutrient we didn't even know about, that gets me really excited, which is why I think I've been so excited about C15. So anyway, in the show notes, I'll put where to find you, where to find Fatty 15, all the information, the Genova test. If anyone is interested in it, we'll put it all there. This has been incredible. I always learn from you. I love our conversations. Last question for you. What do you do on a daily basis to ignite your nutritious life?
All right. So here's my daily routine. I tend to not be a big, so I do wake up, my brain works in the morning. It's like,
that's me. That's me.
Right? Yep. So I've got morning brain. So I am not going to waste that morning brain.
That's me too. That's why I get right to work. I get right to work. I do all my other stuff, the workout stuff, everything after. I get right to work when my brain is my best.
We're the same. Okay, so we're the same with that. So I don't want to mess with that. So I don't have I myself do not have a heavy breakfast. I kind of just my day, my brain's already kicking off and going. I do though have as a mid-morning snack, I do have a couple of slices, like a serving of pure cheese. So not like pizza, and it's just pure, and it kind of lean toward harder cheeses. Those are the ones with more C15 in it. And I do have like a whole grain. I don't want to give the brand name, but it's a whole grain cracker that only has 3 ingredients, and you can actually see the grains. It's not like a processed thing. Yep. And fiber can actually feed microbes in your gut, and they can produce a tiny amount of C15. Ooh. So you can kind of maybe get an extra boost by getting that fiber mixed with the cheese.
I mean, your gut really can do so many amazing things, right? When you treat it right, it is really incredible.
And so that combination, that keeps me full. Like I'm happy that because that fat has filled me. I've got my C15, my little microbe boost, work through the day. I sit too much. For sure. But then we live in next to a park. So we Eric and I, my husband and I, we go for daily walks. And then we have fish probably it's actually more like 3 to 5 nights a week.
Okay.
We'll have fish as a routine, a part of our diet. Red meat, maybe once every 2 or 3 weeks.
Okay.
So not very often, but it is a treat. And then with regard to working out, I'm actually an evening exerciser. It helps me wind down.
We differ there.
Yeah, I couldn't do it. So I'm done. My brain is done at the end of the night. And so I'll just hop on the bike or row machine, and it actually helps me get a really good night's sleep. So
that's great, because for many people, working out at night can actually keep them up. So that's good. If it works for you, that's great though.
It's
amazing.
Really unusual. So that's my
those are the things you do on a daily basis. I love it.
Mm-hmm.
So good. Again, thank you so much, Stephanie. You're amazing, and so good to see you always, even if it is virtually. So good to see you. I can't wait to see you again in real life, though. Thank you so much.
Okay, this was a joy.